What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Stamina Warden. So the Stamina Warden is quite a strong spec in Elsweyr. Stamina Nightblade has been taken down a few notches due to a couple of changes to their class abilities in Elsweyr, which means the Stamina Warden has kind of risen up, so to speak, to kind of take their place. So the Stamina Warden right now is actually one of the strongest stamina specs in the game right now, very similar to how it was in previous patches. Stamina Necromancers still outparse Magicka Stamina Wardens right now, mainly because of that major vulnerability that Necromancers have through Pestilent Colossus, but Stamina Wardens provide a very strong contender here for single target DPS, as well as some really nice cleave damage with Subterranean Assault. So a very, very powerful class if you have access to it. That's kind of the downside of running a Stamina Warden. You do need to have access to the Warden class. Now you can get it by purchasing it through crowns on the crown store, but you do need to pay in order to get this class here. That's kind of the downside of wanting to run a Stamina Warden. So, just like the rest of our build videos, we're going over gear, skills, attributes, everything you need to know. Basically, recreate this build yourself. I will be talking a bit about alternative sets that you might want to farm or hold onto, depending on the specific scenario that you are in, whether you have access to certain DLCs, or whether you need to farm certain sets before you can grab your best in slot sets like I have here. Then we'll go over our 6 million dummy kind of rotation, just to kind of show you guys how the rotation actually works. It is a static rotation here, so you might need to heavy attack here and there, and I will show you guys where the best place is to kind of introduce that heavy attack there. And then we'll do a 21 million dummy parse so you guys can see the rotation in action over a long period of time, as well as get a point of comparison to other stamina DPS classes. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started here first with our gear. So this is just one of many different gear combinations you might run. This particular gear combination pretty much optimizes for single target DPS, so straight up boss DPS. This is not necessarily going to be the best for AoE trash bowls, but if you are just looking to maximize damage against a single boss, then this is the build to go for. We start off with our Monster Helm set, which is still Velidreth's, still the strongest Monster Helm set in the game for stamina DPS. You will notice we have a max health enchant, and that's because of the nerf to regen foods. That's Artaeum Thickaway Broth and Dubious Kamaran Throne. Due to the changes with that food, you pretty much have one of two options. You can either play an Orc, or you can add in a max health enchant on a large piece. So we're playing as a Dark Elf, so we need to add that max health enchant on one of our large pieces. If we're an Orc, then we can run a max stamina enchant here instead and be okay. We are still going with 2 medium though. We're not going with 6 medium, 1 heavy. That's just kind of cutting it a little bit too much in terms of DPS. Having that additional medium piece there is going to be more important than having additional health from a heavy armor piece there. For our body set, we're running Perfected Relequen. Relequen still the strongest set in the game for stamina DPS. Single target here. The Perfected Armor can be obtained through Cloud Rest, Vet Cloud Rest +1, +2, and +3. So you cannot do Vet Cloud Rest +0 and get the armor pieces. You will only get the normal imperfect version of Relequen. The normal version of Cloud Rest, all configurations also drop the normal version of Relequen. Now, normal version of Relequen is still a pretty strong set here. The difference between the imperfect and the normal imperfect version is going to be that loss of that max stamina bonus on the 5 piece, which isn't that big of a deal when it comes to stamina DPS because we don't have that many stamina max stamina modifiers. So whether you want to use perfect or imperfect, it's kind of up to you which set that you're able to run. Obviously, the perfected version is going to be stronger, but the imperfect version is actually not that far behind. The front bar set that we're running is going to be Perfected Lokkestiiz. This comes from Sunspire, so this is the new trial and Elsweyr. Perfected comes from any of the vet configurations, so it does not have to be hard mode at all. For any of the bosses, you can just run through it on normal vet and you can get the perfected version of this set. The imperfect version comes from normal Sunspire, as well as any chest, regardless of whether that is normal Sunspire or veteran Sunspire. The difference there is that 5-piece bonus, that 833 weapon crit, is not present in the imperfect version of Lokkestiiz. Now that being said, imperfect Lokkestiiz is still a very, very strong set. The 5-piece doesn't change at all, duration, anything like that, so it is still a very powerful set. So even if you can't get the perfected version just yet, you can still use the normal imperfect version of Lokkestiiz to great effect here. For our weapons, we are still going with double daggers. So we have 2 sharpened daggers, and we are able to run our Double Ravage Health poisons now, and that's because of the changes that were made, the fix to the bug that was decreasing our back bar enchant's effectiveness while we had poisons on our front bar. And with that bug fixed, we can now use Double Ravage Health poisons and not worry too much about our back bar enchant. Back bar is still the Maelstrom Bow infused with a weapon damage enchant. You can also go with the Master's Bow if you do not have access to the Maelstrom Arena. Now for our weapons, you can still go with Nirn on the main hand if you'd like. You can also go with Sharpened like I have here. It's kind of up to you how RNG decides to play in your favor or not. If you do decide to go with Nirn main hand, the DPS difference is pretty much non-existent. It's a very, very small difference, if there's a difference at all, so long as you're able to maintain that penetration by adjusting your CP points around. So if you go with Nirn main hand, you'll need to adjust your CPs in piercing upwards to adjust for the loss of penetration. For our jewelry, we're going with all Bloodthirsty, with all weapon damage enchants. Bloodthirsty still is not affecting the bear, but it is still affecting the rest of our damage, so it's still one of the best options when it comes to jewelry sets here. Other potential jewelry trait options would be Robust and Infused. Infused is going to be a little bit stronger just because we have more weapon damage modifiers than we have max stamina modifiers on a stamina DPS. But if you don't have access to jewelry crafting and you can't transmute to Infused or Bloodthirsty, then Robust is your only jewelry trait option there. And then for armor, all Divines is going to be our trait of choice, and then 1 health enchant if you are not an orc. If you're an orc, then you don't need this max health enchant. The rest of the pieces here are going to be max stamina enchants here. Now, in terms of other sets that you might want to run, we're going to go through these pretty much in alphabetical order, but we will start off with first with crafted gear. So there are 2 sets that you're going to want to have on the hand. First one is a base game set, Hunding's Rage. Very classic set here, just adds up straight weapon damage. Because it is a static bonus, you do want to have this on the body in an ideal scenario. You can still run this as a front bar set, but it's not going to be quite as effective as if it was on the body. Base game set, 6 traits to craft it yourself. You can either buy it off guild traders, or maybe you can get somebody to craft it for you in one of your trading guilds perhaps, or another social guild. Very, very good set to hold on to here, especially if you're starting to farm for Relequen and Lokkestiiz. The other set is going to be Mechanical Acuity. Not quite as strong on stamina DPS compared to magic DPS because you do have higher crit chance, base crit chance, due to the fact that you do have double daggers, which give you additional crit, but still a nice set to run, especially again as you're farming for Relequen, Lokkestiiz, and other sets to wear in trials. 3-piece doesn't add too much with the spell damage, but the additional max crit chance with the 5-piece is particularly strong. Those are 2 crafted sets that you might want to run while you are farming for your other sets. Now moving on to our medium armor sets here. First, starting off with dungeon sets. There is 1 dungeon set that I want to mention here, and that's going to be Leviathan. This is a base game set, comes from Crypt of Hearts. It just adds straight up weapon crypt, so very similar to Hunding's Rage. To get the most out of Leviathan, you do want to wear this on the body, not on the front bar set, but you can run this on the front bar set if you do happen to get the Leviathan daggers before you can get your Leviathan body pieces here. So very, very strong set, particularly because of the boost to the Shadow Mundus that was made last patch. Another set here you're going to want to have on hand is going to be Tsagvin's Warband. This comes from Frostvault, so you do need to have access to the Wrathstone DLC in order to farm this set here. Medium armor set, so you can just get it in your body, or you can get it as a front bar set. It is actually very nice as a front bar set here. So with all 10 stacks from that 5-piece, you get 1290 weapon crit, which ends up being just a little bit under, I think 4% crit or something like that, but you also gain minor force, so you get back 1 global cooldown because now you don't have to recast Rearming Trap, so you are able to use 1 additional spam bolt this way. In addition, Tsagvin's Warband does give you physical penetration on the 4-piece, which allows you to invest a little bit less into piercing, and you can move those points out into other nodes there. Another set that I kind of want to give an honorable mention to is going to be Essence Thief. It's actually not that bad of a set due to the buff that it received in Elsweyr. So the 5-piece, when you deal damage with a light attack, so now it's a 100% chance to crit. You draw essence from the enemy that pulls near them for 5 seconds. The actual essence itself still spawns away from the enemy. It doesn't spawn near you, or next to you I should say, but it is a lot closer now than it used to be, so it's actually a lot easier to grab now. When you grab the energy, you heal for 3900, you restore 3900 stamina, and you increase your damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. This effect can occur every 10 seconds, so pretty much you can get a 10% increase to damage done theoretically 100% of the time, although you do have to account for some essences you might not be able to grab, or you might need to move out of group to grab them, and that kind of decreases your uptime accordingly. Very, very nice for sustain, and even though it's not going to be pulling record numbers here, it's still a pretty decent set to have on hand if you do have trouble with sustain here. Comes from White Gold Towers, who do not have access to the Imperial City DLC to farm this set. Moving on to other sets here, we're going to talk about trial set. There are basically three trial sets you want to hold on to here. First one's going to be Twice Fanged Serpent or Twice Fanged Snake. This comes from Sanctum Ophidia, which is a base game trial. It basically increases your physical penetration by 860 for each stack that you get, up to 5 stacks. So very nice for trash pulls, where you might not necessarily be able to get everything hit with Major Fracture from your Subterranean Assault. Don't have to worry about Alkosh being applied to all the mobs because you have all that penetration from Twice Fanged Serpent. You wouldn't use this on boss fights. This is strictly a trash fight set. Next we have War Machine. Stamina Wardens are using the Bear Ultimate. This costs 75 ultimate to use, making it one of the cheaper ultimates to use in the game, which pairs very nicely with War Machine. So when you use ultimate ability, you and the closest two allies within 28 meters of you gain Major Slayer for 10 seconds. So very nice group utility set. Definitely has lost some power due to the introduction of Lokkestiiz and Sunspire, but still a nice holdover set to have on hand here, particularly in 4-man content where you can, especially in 1 tank, 3 DPS configurations, you can give Major Slayer to everybody in your group and don't have to worry about farming Lokkestiiz at all. This comes from Halls of Fabrication, so you do not have access to the Morrowind expansion in order to grab this set. Finally, Vicious Ophidian, also known as Vicious Serpent here. Base game set from all the 3 Kra'gh trials. Not quite as strong as it used to be back about a year and a half, 2 years ago, but still a decent set to have on hand, especially because of the cost reduction to stamina abilities on that 5-piece there. Now again, not as strong as other sets because it is not a strict DPS increase. It's not like it doesn't deal any damage itself on the 5-piece, but it does give you additional sustain, which might allow you to use fewer heavy attacks, which might result in a slight DPS increase. So a nice set to have on hand for trash pulls as well, due to the additional stamina you get when you something that you've damaged has died. And finally, there are a handful, very few actually, handful of medium armor Overland sets that you're going to want to have on hand. Spring and Thorns, which comes from Ben Korai, very similar to Twice Fanged Serpent. Trash pull set here for the additional physical penetration. Beyond that, the only other set that is a Overland set that you can get is going to be Briarheart. This comes from Hrothgar, but because it is an Overland set, you can actually buy this off of guild traders. So when you deal critical damage, you have 10% chance to increase your weapon damage by 449 for 10 seconds, and it also heals you for 609 all of your critical strikes while that weapon damage boost is in effect. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So in terms of just raw 5-piece effect, it is basically the same as Hunding's Rage. It averages out to about 298, 299 weapon damage. The difference is Briarheart is a proc set, so it can carry over to your back bar, which allows you to use it as your front bar. It'll proc, and you get that weapon damage on your back bar as well. So it ends up being actually a little bit stronger than Hunding's Rage because of the fact that it does carry over to your back bar, so you can use it as a front bar set here. So another set you can hold on to while you're farming Relequen or Lokkestiiz. And finally, don't want to give this, don't want to miss out on this set here. You have a heavy armor set known as Berserking Warrior or Advancing Yokeda. This is a base game set from Helra Citadel, and just basically gives you a bunch of crit chance on the 5-piece. So a maximum of 6,000 crit strike rating, which ends up being just a little bit over, a little bit under, I believe, being a little bit around 8 to 9% additional weapon crit, so pretty strong here. It has been changed in Elsweyr to last for 6 seconds, giving you a little bit more time on your back bar, but we don't need to worry about that too much as a stamina warden. Now the downside of Berserking Warrior is the fact that you do need to have access to jewelry crafting in order to transmute the jewelry, because the jewelry comes in healthy, which obviously is not a DPS oriented jewelry trait. So you do want to be able to transmute this to either Robust, Infused, or Bloodthirsty. So that's kind of the downside of running Berserking Warrior. You also need to run the jewelry and weapons. This has to be a front bar set because it is heavy armor. Moving on, those are to our Monster Helm sets. There are a few Monster Helm sets that you're going to want to have on hand here if you do not have access to Velidreth, because Velidreth does come from a Shadows of the Hist dungeon. You have basically 3 Monster Helm sets to have on hand. First one's going to be Kra'gh, and this is mostly used for the 1-piece, less so for the 2-piece. The 2-piece is actually fairly weak overall. It does have some limitations as well. For example, you have to be within melee range in order to deal all the damage, and it can proc while you're outside of melee range. Again, you're wearing it for that 1-piece physical penetration, so you can shift some points out of piercing and put them into other CP nodes. You usually pair this with something like Slimecraw for the additional weapon crit, or Velidreth for the additional weapon damage. So you can do something like Kra'gh Helmet and Velidreth Shoulders in order to get the physical penetration and the weapon damage. For a full Monster Helm set though, base game set, this comes from Selene's web, it is Selene. So the 1-piece is not quite as strong as Velidreth's because, again, we have more weapon damage modifiers than we have mech stamina modifiers. The 2-piece is actually stronger. It has a stronger single target potential than Velidreth just due to the shorter cooldown and higher damage output. That being said, Velidreth, the proc itself, can out DPS Selene's depending on the size of the boss's hitbox, and that's because Velidreth, the proc can actually hit the same enemy more than once provided the hitbox is large enough. So it spawns 3 spores, and more than 1 spore can hit an enemy if it is large enough. In addition, Selene's only hits 1 enemy. Velidreth has 3 spores, so theoretically you can hit up to 3 enemies with Velidreth if you have a nice stack going. And finally, Slimecraw. This is for the Minor Berserk. Now, Stamina Wardens have a native source of Minor Berserk by slotting Bird of Prey. If you do not slot Bird of Prey though, and you cannot depend on your healers to give you Mana Berserk uptime, perhaps you're running one tank, 3 DPS and 4-man content, or you're running a Pug Trials group, or your Trials group is still progressing so your healers aren't getting very good Combat Prayer uptimes, then Slimecraw comes into play here. Again, you can just slot Bird of Prey, but you might want to swap that ability out for something like Vigor or some other other ability to increase your survivability for progression groups. So Slimecraw is a nice Monster Helm set to have on hand in those very few situations where you will not be able to slot Bird of Prey. Moving on to our character sheet. I am a Dark Elf. Dark Elves are going to be one of the 2 best races when it comes to stamina DPS, the other one being Orcs. Orcs get 2000 max stamina, 1000 max health, 258 additional weapon damage, so it gives you a little bit of additional meatiness. Dark Elves, on the other hand, get 1875 magicka and stamina and 258 weapon and spell damage. So, if you decide to play a Magicka Warden from time to time, Dark Elves are going to be the better option compared to the Orcs. Now, if you also want to be a tank, Orcs are going to be very good for tanking as well because of the stamina health, as well as the weapon damage, giving you a little bit of some off DPS as a tank. If you want to be a pure stamina DPS though, you have a few other options when it comes to races. You have what I like to call the Sustain races, the Red Guards, the Imperials, and the Wood Elves. All 3 of these races get 2000 max stamina. Red Guards get 990 stamina back every 5 seconds whenever they deal damage. Wood Elves get 258 stamina regen. Imperials get 2000 max health, and they get 3% cost reduction to all abilities and 333 magicka health and stamina back whenever they deal damage every 5 seconds. So all three of these classes do not have that weapon damage bonus that the Orcs and the Dark Elves have, meaning that their damage potential is actually going to be lower. Their ceiling is lower compared to Dark Elves and Orcs, but in return they get much better sustain. So that could offset the DPS difference a little bit, but generally speaking, Orcs and Dark Elves are going to be a little bit stronger. Now, if you want to play kind of a master, jack of all trades, master of none warden, you want to make this your main, you want to experiment a little bit with all the different roles in the game, you can also run Khajiits. So Khajiits get 825 magicka health stamina, they get 85 magicka regen, stamina regen, 100 health regen, 10% additional critical healing done, and 10% additional critical damage done. So very balanced stats, makes for a very nice sort of hybrid race where if you want to switch your roles very flexibly, you can definitely do that on a Khajiit. For attributes, all points into stamina here. We do meet a recommended health threshold for Vet Trials, 17k when we have minor toughness up, so we don't have to put points into health this way. You can, of course, put points into health if you want the additional survivability. It's kind of up to you. I would personally probably put no more than 4 or 5 points into health this way, but it's kind of up to you if you want to give a little bit more DPS up for some more survivability. For our Mundus, we're still going with the Shadow. It's still the strongest Mundus stone in the game for stamina DPS. We're using our Tam Takeaway Broth. This gives us max health, max stamina, stamina regen, and health regen. We do need the regen from this food. The alternative is going to be Dubious Command Throne, which gives just max health, max stamina, and stamina regen. We just need it in order to sustain a full light attack rotation. And even then, we might need to heavy attack here and there on longer fights in order to fully sustain our rotation. To help out with sustain, we are also a stage 2 vampire that gives us 10% additional magic and stamina regen. If we were to advance to stage 3, we also get access to the Undeath passive, which gives us some damage mitigation while we're under 50% health. Just bear in mind that if you are a vampire, you will take more damage from fire, and your health regen is also going to see a hit. So it's kind of up to you if you want to be a vampire. I personally find the 10% additional stamina regen to be quite helpful in order to help out our sustain. Now for our bars, starting with our front bar, this is the dual wield bar. We have Rending Slashes, Subterranean Assault, Cutting Dive, Bird of Prey for the Minor Berserk, Rearming Trap, Wild Guardian. For our back bar, we have Caltrops, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Bird of Prey, Bullnetch, and Wild Guardian again. We have to double slot this because the way pets work in this game. And again, Bird of Prey is here for the Minor Berserk. If you are in a group that can maintain Minor Berserk through your Comet Prayers from healers, you can obviously swap these abilities out for something like another Fighter's Guild ability to get the 3% additional weapon damage, or you can slot it in something like Vigor or Green Lotus for the additional self-heals. Moving on to our champion points, the CP cap is still 810, nothing has changed with the CP cap, so still 270 points for each of our different constellations. Starting off with green CPs, 100 Mooncalf, 75 Tenacity, that gives us 95 remaining points. I have 31 Shadow Ward, 31 Tumbling, and 33 Warlord. You can play around with green CPs a little bit here, so for example, you can take 25 points out of Mooncalf to lose 1% stamina regen, but you gain 25 additional points to play around with. You can also push Tenacity all the way up to 100 to get some more stamina back when you heavy attack. Moving on to our blue CPs. This particular CP setup is sort of centered around having all of our debuffs active, so that's Torg's Infused Crusher, that's Alkosh, Major, and Minor Fracture, as well as having 2 sharpened daggers. If you are anticipating lower uptimes on debuffs, or you're running Nirn Sharpen, then obviously you're going to have to put some more points into Piercing. This could be offset by running something like 1-piece Kra'gh, 1-piece Velidreth, or running Sogvens instead of Lokkestiiz, but otherwise you will definitely have to put some points into Piercing. So you have 64 Mighty, 37 Piercing, 66 Precise Strikes, 37 Thaumaturge, 66 Master at Arms. If you want to put some points into Piercing, you can drop Master at Arms to 61 or 56. You can drop Thaumaturge down to 34 or 31. Precise Strikes also goes down to 61 and 56, and Mighty drops down to 56 or 49. Those are the next 2 jump points for each of those nodes there. Finally, for our red CPs, this is a one-size-fits-most approach, so this will give you pretty decent mitigation across pretty much everywhere in the game. But if you want to maximize your mitigation across any single trial or single piece of content, then you will need to shift some red CP points around. So I have 81 Ironclad, 61 Thick-Skinned, and 64 into both Hardy, an Elemental Defender. That's pretty much all of the build information, so now let's go ahead and talk about our rotation. So I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this rotation is going to be static. So that basically means that we're not really going to be changing our rotation at all. It's basically going to be 1 bar, 2 bars, front bar, back bar, front bar, back bar. We're not changing the order that we're doing our abilities. We will be breaking our front bar rotation just because, I should say our back bar rotation, because we are centered around Subterranean Assault, which has a 3-second cast time. So the idea behind the rotation is you do Subterranean Assault, you do 2 abilities, then you go back and do Subterranean Assault. But because of sort of this nice evenness, we have 4 abilities on our back bar, and we have pretty much 4 abilities besides Subterranean Assault on our front bar here. This ends up being pretty nice overall when it comes to our rotation. Again, it ends up making it static. So just to kind of give you an idea of the static rotation first, ideally you will have all of your ultimate up, so you have your 75 ultimate for Wild Guardian. Start off first, you can first pre-buff with Bullnetch, so you have that stamina regen going from the Netch. Then do Trap, and start up with your back bar rotation, do all of your back bar dots, then Subterranean Assault. You do Hail, Caltrops, Subterranean Assault, Poison Injection, Rending Slashes, and trap, burn, burn, burn. Assault, full niche, poison injection, assault. Might not have stamina to do this. So it's a little bit different just because we did start pre-buff with trap, but in a 21 million dummy rotation it'll make a little bit more sense here. So the idea, generally speaking, is you always want to recast trap, and that's because it has a 14-second duration, so it's pretty much your entire backbar duration. And then you're going to basically alternate between using Bull Nudge on the backbar, or you're going to be using your ultimate, your Bear ultimate. And it'll make more sense when we do a 21 million dummy. Sustain wasn't quite good enough to kind of show you guys the full static rotation, but I will kind of walk through it when we do the 21 million dummy parse here. So we are doing 21 million dummy because it does give us a fair point of comparison across all the other stamina classes except for stamina necromancer because of that major vulnerability. So you can take this parse here and you can compare it to other stamina classes in the game because the raid dummy does give us a more standardized idea, standardized buff, standardized debuffs. It also gives us a better idea of how our sustain looks because it also gives us orbs on cooldown. Now remember, if you are running Lokkestiiz, you always want to activate synergies on your front bar if you're running Lokkestiiz solely on the front bar. If you have Lokkestiiz on your body set, then it doesn't really matter what bar you activate your synergies on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here, and I will try to narrate the static rotation once it begins. It is going to be a little bit weird first in the beginning, just because we pre-buff with Rearming Trap, but you will get into kind of a groove of things once that happens. So this is still kind of this awkward transition period because trap, we buff with trap here. So I'll tell you guys when it should start. So it should start now. So that is the backbar rotation. Then we do Endless Hail, Caltrops, Subterranean Assault, Poison Injection, Rending Slashes, 2 birds, then we do the same thing again, Endless Hail, Caltrops, Netch, Poison Injection, Trap Bird. I messed that up a little bit there. You will see that I am pretty much doing the exact same order of abilities each time once we got out of that weirdness with pre-buffing with the Rearming Trap here. So we're pretty much doing the exact same order of abilities. So sub, do Endless Hail, Caltrops, sub, Poison Injection, Rending Slashes, sub, Trap, Bird, sub, Bird, Bird, do sub, here we go. Hail, Caltrops, sub, Netch, Poison Injection, sub, Rending, Bear, sub, Trap, Bird, and then we repeat the whole thing over again. Now if you want to do a heavy attack, this is where I would put it in. At the very end here, when instead of doing 2 birds, you do bird, heavy attack, right into a sub. So that's where you would put in that heavy attack there. You would not do this here because you don't really have time to do a heavy attack. So if you have recently re-upped your Netch, then you do not have an opportunity to use a heavy attack. As you can see there, I had to re-up our Netch, and we do not have time to do double bird, so we can't do a heavy attack there if we needed it. But here, because we do have time to do double bird, we can, if we wanted to, we can substitute one of those birds with a heavy attack. So there we go, that's our parse there. It's actually a pretty low parse. I actually had a higher parse, and I'll show you guys the higher parse earlier. So we pulled 85.5k, but I did have two higher parses. I had an 87.7k, and then I had an 88.8k. So let's take a look at the 88.8k, because it pretty much did the exact same rotation, probably a little bit of crit RNG involved here with the lower parse, as well as I think I hiccuped on the rotation once. So you can see here, really strong 88.8k, definitely a very powerful stamina DPS class here. Subterranean Assault is a very powerful move here. You can see it makes up pretty much our top contributor to DPS, even more than Endless Hail and Arms of Relequen. The bear itself is actually very strong, so Swipe and Crushing Swipes are its normal attacks. So just with its normal attacks itself, it's doing about 10.9% of our DPS, so just under Arms of Relequen here. Then with Guardian Savagery mixed in, this is the ultimate. It's a very powerful ultimate. So you can see we averaged 80.9k with a max hit of 146.9k, probably during Execute when we had our Bloodthirsty act. Oh no, Bear is not affected by Bloodthirsty, but still a very powerful hit. If it was affected by Bloodthirsty, this would definitely be somewhere around 160k or something like that. So yeah, really powerful spec here. The only downside, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is you have to pay in order to get the access to Warden. It is on the Crown Store, so you can buy it with in-game gold, as I believe you can gift Warden, but regardless, you still have to find some way of obtaining this class first. It is not a base game class. So that is it for this build video. If you guys have any questions about the build itself, let me know down in the comment section below. I will try to write up the static rotation for you guys so you guys can see how it is. There's also another rotation where if you swap Bull Netch and Rearming Trap, is also a static rotation there as well. There's a little bit, very similar DPS, maybe a little bit lower that way. Again, hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.